All right, it says we're live, so we're rolling. My name's Alex Simon. This is the Lasmini Town Hall on housing and including both renters and homeowners kind of rights. I think it's important to do right now because of the I think economic crisis that many have been thrown into because of the pandemic. And we're going to start with kind of the renter side and then go into the homeowner side. But first, let's welcome in our panel today. We have Michael Roberts in our Syracuse office, Cindy, who's the director of litigation in our Utica office, as well as Rose, who's our paralegal in Utica and helps with the helpline quite a bit. So first off, let's just go around and Michael, talk about your background in law and with Lasmini and how long you've been with the organization and stuff like that.
Hi, my name is Michael Roberts. I am a staff attorney in Syracuse, as Alex mentioned. I have been with Lasmini for 3 years now, doing primarily Social Security and housing law. And that's pretty much my background because I hadn't started practicing until I was hired by Legal Aid 3 years ago.
Very cool. Cindy, go ahead and talk about your background in law and how long you've been with Lasmini.
Okay, well, I've been with Lasmini. Actually, it's just my 20th anniversary in July.
Wow.
A long time. And I started out my career doing housing work. I'm now the director of litigation for the agency. And we are going to be talking more on the foreclosure side today. The Lasmini's been doing foreclosures since the economic crisis of 2008. So we've been doing them for quite a while now.
Okay. Very cool. And Rose, how about yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Rose Roberts, and I had been working as a certified housing counselor for 7 years during the housing crisis, and then later came over to Legal Aid, where I now work as a paralegal / housing counselor, and I've been with the agency, I think this is going on the 5th year maybe, and I just enjoy working with individuals, trying to help them save their homes.
Very cool. Okay, so you know, as a renter, on the renter side of things, I think there's a lot of people that have been that have like I said, been in economic crisis, and maybe they have gotten behind on rent, and they're a few months behind on rent, and they're worried about evictions. Can they be evicted, Michael?
Yes, you can technically still be evicted, especially if the eviction was filed before or issued before March 16th, 2020. But the recent court has cited that they must hold a status or settlement conference to address a range of subjects related to the case and COVID-19 concerns and the impact the pandemic has had on the person since the date of filing and or the date the warrant was originally issued.
Mm-hmm.
If the eviction had been filed after March 17th, 2020, the proceeding shall continue to be suspended until further notice from the court system. Either way, currently the earliest an eviction can legally occur as of this moment is October 1st, 2020.
Okay. What are the let's say the landlord is taking somebody to court. They want to take them to court. What does that look like, and what options do they have? What do the tenants have in court?
So there are a couple of different ways the landlord can bring an eviction. If it is due to non-payment of rent, the landlord must provide a written notice of non-payment, giving one 14 days from the date of the notice to come current with the rent. After that 14 days has expired, the landlord can file for an eviction on that ground. Once they are allowed to, the court will schedule an eviction hearing, and if an eviction warrant is granted, you will have a minimum of 14 days from the court date to move out before you are forced out by either the city marshal or county sheriff's department. If you are able to come current on the rent at any time prior to the sheriff or marshal removing you and your belongings from the property, it renders the eviction warrant null and void, meaning that you will not be evicted, at least legally. Similarly, if the eviction is based on an expiration of lease term, the landlord must give you a written notice of either 30 days if you have lived in the residence for less than 1 year, or if your lease is for less than 1 year, 60 days if you have occupied the residence for more than 1 year but less than 2 years, or your lease is for between 1 and 2 years, and 90 days if you have lived in the residence for more than 2 years or have a lease term of at least 2 years. The landlord may only file the eviction after the notice time expires, and if you are able to move out before the court date or any time before the sheriffs execute the warrant, it would also render the eviction null and void, since the eviction would be pointless without the tenant living in the property.
Oh, I'm just throw a follow-up question out there to you and to anybody. What if they don't give you proper notice for whatever reason, like they're in violation of that of some of the things that you said, like a 30-day notice or a 90-day?
Well, if you're in violation of that, and they are brought, if they bring you to court, you can show the judge that they did not comply with the proper notice requirements, and the judge then should throw the case out because they're in proper notice. And if the landlord tries at any time without a warrant and without getting proper notice, that is an illegal eviction, and you should contact either the local police if you feel comfortable with that, or the county sheriff's department, but if they won't help, maybe the state attorney general's office. Because it's not a crime to do so.
Okay. What would you say? What is an eviction memorandum mean? What does that specifically mean?
An eviction moratorium.
Sorry.
Right. So eviction moratorium is basically the state saying that no eviction proceedings shall be held and warrants cannot be enforced or granted during a specific time period. In New York State's case right now, the moratorium essentially is in effect and will continue to be in effect till at least October 1st.
Okay. What would you say to anybody that is where they're in a situation where the landlord's increasing rent during the pandemic? What can they do in those situations?
So, again, with increasing the rent beyond 5% of the original agreed upon rent, the landlord must give either 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days, depending upon how long you've lived in the property, and or the length of the lease term that has expired. That is. And if they do not give proper notice, then any increase in the rent is illegal and can be brought to the court, and the court will likely strike that down as well.
What would you say to the tenant where, and this is kind of just a question that popped into my head, to the tenant that is in a situation where the landlord has not been fixing the property and the property is actually kind of like dangerous to live in, or not properly taken care of, and they've been communicating with the landlord to fix the property? What would you say to a tenant in that type of situation?
In that type of situation, you can either bring the lack of repairs or dangerous situations to the attention of the local codes department, and then they can bring action against them in court. In addition, if the conditions persist despite being informed, you can tell the landlord that you are withholding rent until these conditions are fixed. And if an eviction is filed against you and you are brought to court on the eviction, that can be a defense of why you didn't pay rent for the time that the condition existed or continues to exist.
This is pandemic time, during pandemics and economic crisis. A lot of times there's a lot of scams out there. Are there any scams in the landlord-tenant relationship that they should be aware of?
Well, if at any time during your relationship with your landlord says you have to get out now, or you have to remove your property or anything to that effect, again, that's an illegal eviction, and you should follow up with the local authorities or sheriff's department or state attorney general's office, because it is a misdemeanor under New York state law now, that if a threat of an illegal eviction or illegal eviction occurs, such as a lockout, they can be liable for a crime.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Is there anything I missed? Cindy or Rose, do you want to add anything?
I just had a quick question for Michael. What kind of resources might be available to tenants right now if they are behind on their rent? Are there any resources to help them catch up on their rent?
Depending upon what county you're in, the local DSS office might be a resource to either provide rental assistance or point you in a direction where they can help with back rent, or in a case in which you want to move yourself from the property, they may also be able to help you with moving expenses.
Okay.
I know here in Oneida County, our community foundation has a program that's helping people pay for back rent. Is there anything similar in Onondaga County that you're aware of at this point?
At this point, yes, there is. You have to be under a certain amount of the federal poverty line. And actually, as far as I know, one program that helps with that about 3 months back rent, the application period, I believe, is up today.
Oh, okay.
Today, August 14th. So if you're not in Onondaga County, I would say call. If you're behind on rent, I would definitely call the local DSS office
Today.
today.
Yeah.
Right now.
Thank you.
Yep. And also, if you, one thing is if you do end up back in court, and you have a loss of income or any other type of financial hardship due to the pandemic, there is something called the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which was enacted by Governor Cuomo in June or July. Anyway, so how it works is that if you are brought to court, you can raise the defense that you suffered a loss of income since March 7th, 2020. You are in receipt of state or federal benefits such as cash assistance, SNAP benefits, SSI, New York State Disability, HEAP, or unemployment insurance due to the pandemic. If you can demonstrate such a financial hardship to the judge, then they cannot be evicted for any housing related debts occurring between March 7th and the end of all pandemic related restrictions on business, public accommodations, or non-essential gatherings in the county in which you live.
Yep.
Although there is a caveat to that, the landlord still may be able to get a money judgment against you for the money you owe, despite your financial hardship. But again, you will not be threatened with actual eviction. Your housing is safe.
Very, very good information. I appreciate that.
Oh wait, one more thing.
Sure.
Alex. Sorry. So one other scam that you should be aware of is that any landlord or utility company cuts off any of your utilities, such as electric, gas, or water during this pandemic-related emergency. that is illegal, and they must restore service 40 hours after such service is cut. And if they do not, you can report it to the local authorities, the state attorney general office, the sheriff's office, and you can also file a complaint in court. And the judge should require them to restore service immediately, because the supply of these utilities are essential to keep the public health guidelines established in the state.
Okay. And we should also say, if you have any specific questions about your particular relationship with your landlord, and you're in some of these positions of eviction and not getting enough notice, and any type of possible scams that might be out there, including some of the things Michael just mentioned, encourage you to reach out to our helpline, and that's 1-877-777-5162, as well as our online intake system, which is at lasmany.org/intake. Did I mess it up?
6152?
6152. Sorry. Yep. Dyslexic today. Sorry. 6152. We'll give that number out again towards the end as well. And obviously we'll post it a lot on our social media feeds as well. So moving to this foreclosure side, what would you say to the person that says, I've stopped making mortgage payments during the COVID-19 pandemic, and now I'm afraid of what the bank might do? Obviously, there was I think a moratorium as well on mortgage payments in some cases, and some people might be behind.
Right. First thing I would try to do is just put the person's mind a little bit at ease, because there are a variety of options available for individuals who have experienced difficulty and become delinquent due to COVID. Particularly anyone that was less than 30 days past due on March 1st, 2020. There are different options depending upon the type of mortgage you have. Any federally backed loans, such as Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA, USDA, or a HUD, Native American or Native Hawaiian home loan, all have options available to them, to homeowners due to COVID. And currently about 70% of the mortgages in the United States are federally backed mortgages. So there's a good chance your loan is in that category. If you happen to have a loan that's not federally backed, however, there still may be options available too. Most of the lenders and mortgage servicers have created programs very similarly modeled after what the government loans have offered. Excuse me. But each case has to be reviewed individually and determine what the best options for each individual is. The big important takeaway is that there is help available. Homeowners may qualify for retention options, such as a mortgage forbearance, a loan modification, a partial claim, repayment. They may resort to filing a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, or in some cases, even a Chapter 7. Or they may have determined that they choose to dispose of the home. There are disposition options as well. Maybe they've been offered a job out of state, or maybe it just makes sense for them at this point to give up the home. And in those cases, they may qualify. Actually, if there's enough equity in the home, they could just sell the property. If there's not, they could consider a short sale or a deed in lieu, filing a Chapter 7, letting it go to foreclosure. There's a number of options available, and they all have to be really examined carefully with each individual client.
And right now with the federal loans, there's the option of 180-day forbearance, which a forbearance means that you get a temporary stop of your payments until such time as you're able to be more financially on your feet. So you get an initial 180 days. If after the 180 days you're still experiencing a hardship, you could qualify for up to an additional 180 days of forbearance. And again, that's a temporary stop in your payments. But after the forbearance ends, that's when some of these options Rose talks about kick in. How are you going to repay the amount that has grown over that time? So there's a lot of different options. Sometimes the mortgage company can put what you owe on the end of your loan. That's called a partial claim. You might get a loan modification that stretches your mortgage out over a longer time. You could have a repayment plan where you repay the amount you owe over a certain number of months. Or like Rose said, there's the bankruptcy option that can help you catch up. So there's lots of options available. And even as Rose said, for those who don't have federally backed loans, many companies are offering similar things. And often on their website, they'll have on their webpage, they'll have some of that information.
Okay. Some people out there listening might be saying, oh gosh, bankruptcy, God, is that the end of my existence? And I know that's a scary kind of word. What would you say to kind of some of the people that might be thinking, oh God, I never want to go into bankruptcy?
It should never be a scary term anymore, particularly since the last housing crisis in the early 2000s there. We found that many people had to resort to filing bankruptcy as a means to save their home. In a Chapter 13, you repay the arrears over a period of time, 3 to 5 years generally. So during that period, you are saving your home, and at the end, things are restored to normal. In a Chapter 7, you may be giving up your home. However, a large percentage of the clients I've worked with over time have filed a Chapter 7, eliminated their other debts, and then applied for a loan modification and actually been approved when prior to that they'd been denied. So sometimes even a Chapter 7 saves your home. And there's really no longer any stigma associated with filing bankruptcy. It's a program that's there to help people, and there should be no shame involved with it. It helps you refinance your home and save it. And
I always remind people that even honest Abe Lincoln filed for bankruptcy. So many famous people have done it, mainly because of failed businesses. But if companies are allowed to do it, certainly individual people are allowed to do it too. And it can be a really good way to get a fresh start and get some breathing room to just reorganize everything and move forward.
Okay. So what would you say to some of the people that happen when they get the summons to appear in court? What can they expect in court? And they're probably might be scared of going into court or getting in trouble with legal ramifications.
Right. When I get the call from someone that's received a summons, honestly, they're usually quite panic stricken, because right in the summons material, it typically says you need to file an answer within 20 days if you were served in person. That law changed actually a few years ago. Unfortunately, the wording in the document did not. So the first thing I do is ask the person if they have already filed an answer or not. And if they've not, reassure them that they have time. As long as they attend their first settlement conference, they have 30 days to file an answer from that first settlement conference. And then in terms of what to expect at a settlement conference, it really is a homeowner-friendly environment. Some judges hold them right in court. Some actually hold them in chambers. And it's really an opportunity for the homeowner to explain what happened, how they defaulted. In this case, most people are probably going to be saying COVID, but, it's an opportunity to explain what happened and what your intentions are if you want to try to save the house or not. And there is a representative there from the bank as well, their attorney. And generally what happens is once you've expressed your wishes, if it is to retain the home, the opposing counsel hands over a loss mitigation application for you to take home, fill out, and submit. And then court is generally adjourned for 30 to 60 days. During that time, you submit your application. Inevitably, you're going to get a missing document letter saying something's missing.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the way it works. So it's critical to get those documents in very timely and comply with their requests. And then you appear in court again. They may or may not have made a decision by then. It's very possible you get another adjournment. But if they do make a decision, Usually it's first a trial loan modification in which they expect you to make timely payments for a 3-month period. At the end of that period, you're then issued a final loan modification. There are some exceptions. There are some occasions where individuals have been issued a loan modification right away. And with COVID, that is sometimes one of the options. So we may see more people getting a loan modification without having to go through the hoops of a trial period, but time will tell with that. And then if by some chance they've reviewed your loan modification and determined it's just not doable, they can't support it, it's not going to work, as we said, there's still other options. You may choose to file a 13, which stops any foreclosure actions in their tracks and allows you to repay the arrears over time. Or you could consider some of the disposition options I mentioned. If you do accept a loan modification after it has been signed and countersigned by the opposing party, it then gets filed in the county clerk's office. And once that is filed, the opposing counsel withdraws the foreclosure action and cancels the lis pendens, and the servicing goes back to the regular mortgage servicing, and everything's back to normal for the homeowner.
Okay.
And you're out of court at that point, so you don't have to worry about court anymore.
Yeah. And people should not be fearful of court. Really and truly, like I said, I've been doing this over 9 years, and the judges are extremely supportive. No one wants to see anyone lose their home. Even opposing counsel is generally very helpful in terms of, really trying to help the homeowner do what they need to do to save the house.
That's been my experience too. Yeah.
I'm just curious on the courts. Are they, as we know, they've been kind of slowly opening? How are the courts? What are the kind of state of the courts right now in terms of foreclosures?
Cindy, do you want to take?
Sure, I could take it. The courts have been slowly reopening. We went through a couple of months in the beginning of COVID where it was completely shut down. March, April, and part of May, everything was completely shut down. But now the courts are slowly starting to reopen. In central New York, where we're broadcasting from, the courts are still having, if you have to have a conference in your foreclosure case, they're still holding that virtually over video. And the court will basically send you an email, which has a link to click on. And if you click on it, you'll come up on video. If for some reason you can't get the video to work, the court will call you and you can be on the phone. So that's how the courts are holding it. They're not quite going to go into in-person yet unless there's a trial. But in foreclosures, there's very few trials. Most of them do get worked out. I would probably say 99% of them get worked out with the bank in some way.
Okay. And what stage does it go where it needs to go to an auction scenario? When does that come into play?
Okay, if we're in the settlement conference phrases and they have reviewed all the options and determined that they're not going to issue a trial mod or modification, and at that point, the opposing counsel will generally request a order of reference and the appointment of a referee, and the judge reviews that. There's another motion hearing, and then if the judge signs that, then generally you could expect an auction to occur somewhere around 4 to 6 months after that's signed.
The whole process of foreclosure is pretty slow in New York. Just to let everybody know, all foreclosures must go through court in New York. All mortgage foreclosures. In some states, that's not true. So we're very fortunate. But in New York, especially because of our mandatory settlement conference process, foreclosures could take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. Rose and I have seen quite a few that took longer than that. Yeah. But I would say from the time that you're served to the time that the auction happens, you're looking at 1 to 2 years. Some folks longer, but that gives you a general time frame for planning. If you don't plan to stay in your home, that's how much time you could potentially expect.
So it sounds like one of the key elements in this is communication, not being necessarily scared of the bank and the court system, but really being honest and open with your situation and communicating with both of those kind of entities, right?
Right.
Yes. I think the worst thing you could ever do is ignore it. I think sometimes folks, when they get scared, there's a tendency to sort of the ostrich with its head in the sand. It's just, this isn't happening to me. This isn't happening to me. But you got to overcome that fear and reach out, because there's a lot of help available. And whether it's your bank or the courts or legal aid, or there's many certified housing counseling agencies in our service area, home ownership centers that provide help to homeowners. So you're absolutely right. Communication is key. Reach out for help because it's there for you.
Okay. So what happens if a person might be in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy to save the home, and do they have to continue to make payments? And what if they've obviously lost income because of the pandemic, they've been laid off?
Okay, that's happening to a lot of people right now. It's a pretty common occurrence. The first thing you want to do is, most people in bankruptcy are represented by a lawyer. So you want to reach out to your lawyer right away. Under the CARES Act, that's the federal law that gave all of us the stimulus checks. Under that CARES Act, you may be able to redo your bankruptcy plan and extend it out up to 7 years from when the date of your original plan was. So that might give you a chance to really lengthen everything, maybe make your payments smaller, or if you have any new arrears that you owe, put them in the plan and still be able to succeed with your plan. If you don't have a lawyer, which is pretty rare, but there are some people that represent themselves, reach out to the bankruptcy trustee. The bankruptcy trustee's name and number will be on your papers. And the trustee will try to work with you as best they can to see if there's something they can do for you to help you catch up.
Okay. What happens in a trial loan modification?
Okay. If you were in a trial loan modification and were able to successfully continue to make the payments, that's great. You should be ending up with a loan mod and everything's wonderful in your situation. However, if you were impacted by COVID and experienced a financial hardship and were not able to continue that, again, because of the CARES Act, the federally backed mortgages are offering the option of the forbearance that Cindy mentioned earlier, 180 days with the possible extension of another 180 days. So it doesn't mean that you're going to lose your home because you had an issue during the trial period. It is still possible to say that. And again, if it's not a federally backed loan, more than likely the mortgage company that you do have is probably going to be willing to work with you and offer some options to you.
Okay. So what happens if there is a pending tax foreclosure against someone's home?
Okay, that's a very good question. And again, it is happening to a lot of people. In New York, tax foreclosures are very different than mortgage foreclosures. I just want to say that from the beginning because it's an entirely different process. Most of our tax foreclosure, well, all the tax foreclosures, I should say, are handled at the local level. So it's either the county, the town, the village, the city that's collecting the taxes. Most of them follow a uniform state law, which requires them to wait at least 2 years before they actually go to court to try to foreclose on your home. So that's a good thing to know. But once they do go to court, it has to go in front of a judge, and an order has to be signed by a judge before your home could be auctioned. So you're looking at a 2-year plus process before that happens. But there's a very important thing that happens in that process that you really have to pay attention to. And that is when your case goes to court, you're going to get a notice that says you have a certain date, a certain deadline, when you either have to redeem your property or file a written answer with the court. Redeeming your property means paying all the taxes that are due. So the taxes plus any penalties and any interest and fees.
Wow.
If you pay all of that off before the date in that notice, you're going to be fine. The foreclosure will be dismissed against you. If you can't, one thing you can do is file that written answer with the court by the deadline. Your notice will tell you, you also have to mail it to the attorney for the tax department, and their address will be in there. So you mail it and then also file it with the court. And that'll buy you some more time, but ultimately you will have to pay the taxes. Another thing you can do is to file bankruptcy. If you file bankruptcy before the deadline in that notice, Chapter 13 or a Chapter 7, that will stop the tax foreclosure in its tracks. And Chapter 13 is a really excellent way to catch up on. It'll give you up to 5 years to pay those back taxes off. So it's a really, really good option. I just want to point out, though, that there are a few tax departments that don't follow the state law. They have their own special local law that they've developed. So that those places don't always go through the court system. So it's really important to call the tax department and find out if they follow the state law or if they're following their own law. And if so, if they're following their own law, what is the process for that place? For example, Oneida County has its own tax procedure, but all the towns and villages and cities in the county follow the state law. So it can get kind of confusing. And Onondaga County, Michael's in Onondaga County, they have their own tax procedure as well. So it can get a little confusing. And definitely, try to reach out for legal representation if you can, because if you miss the deadline, you lose any rights to your home. So it's very important. That deadline is a key thing to get some help and get some advice before that deadline passes.
Okay.
Actually, if the deadline is passed, they only give you 30 days to try to go back in front of the court and reopen that decision. So the deadlines are very, very strict. Unlike mortgage foreclosures, mortgage foreclosures are a lot more forgiving than tax foreclosures.
Yeah. Sounds like almost like obviously two completely different processes there.
Yes. And we are lucky right now that tax foreclosure auctions, just like evictions, have been put on hold a little bit longer than evictions. So no tax foreclosure auctions can happen before October 15th of 2020.
Okay.
So also, if say your home was already sold at a tax auction and you're still living there, they still have to evict you. And as Michael said, no evictions can happen before October 1st of 2020.
Okay. All right. So how this one of these ways this started, this town hall was, I remember receiving an email from some of the foreclosure team about the "We Buy Ugly Houses" sign. We've all seen them at, major intersections in different cities across upstate New York. And obviously it might be appealing to people that are desperate for whatever reason and think that they could get out from underneath their house and maybe some breathing room. But what have you guys learned about some of these signs and deals across upstate New York?
Well, Rose and I are both veterans of the foreclosure crisis that started in 2008. We saw a lot of this back then, and anytime there's a major disaster, you see people coming out trying to scam people and take advantage of them and take what little money they have left, which is a really, really horrible thing. But those people are out there and they are willing to prey on people who are in trouble. Yeah. So there's a lot of scams. There's even scams with loan modifications. Rose, I'm going to have you talk about that first, about what we see because that's a really important thing to look out for. And then I'll get on to the "We Buy Ugly Houses."
Right. Particularly in the first mortgage crisis we experienced, there were a number of individuals offering to get people loan modifications for a fee. You shouldn't have to pay a fee to get a loan modification. You can apply to your servicer directly without paying anything. If you need help, you can contact a housing counseling agency that's going to do it for free, or a legal aid or legal service. It is legal for attorneys to charge for some assistance if a loan modification is provided, but we used to see attorneys and different scammers just charging exorbitant amounts to submit loan modification applications that didn't end up in loan mods. And people would come to me after spending thousands and thousands of dollars and have nothing to show for it. And had they saved that money, they would have had it toward their mortgage and would have been in a much better position to save their house. On a few rare occasions, the Attorney General's office assisted, and sometimes some of those funds were returned to people, but more than not, often they were not, they were lost dollars.
Yeah, typically what we're hearing is, I can save your house for $5,000. And that was the $5,000 the person needed to get caught up. If you do go with an attorney to help you, make sure it's a local attorney that's licensed with the New York State Bar Association in good standing. And you can actually look that up online on the New York court system website will tell you that. There are many, good private attorneys that help people with these cases as well. But a lot of the trouble was with the out-of-state ones, California, Florida, and then it was very hard to go after them because they would disappear and with the person's money.
And when the settlement conference would come, there would be no show because they couldn't practice in New York State.
Right. So I think that's primarily a scam we are definitely going to start seeing again because people are in trouble and they're reaching out for help. But there's lots of free help available, like Rose said, or if you're going with an attorney, go with a good licensed local attorney, licensed to practice in New York State. The other scams we're seeing, the "We Buy Ugly Houses" sign, they kind of crop up all over the place. They've really all over the country. And what that is there are people out there that will try to pressure you to sell your house for less than it's worth. So they might actually look up the county records and they might see, here's people that have a foreclosure going on in court. Here's people that have a tax foreclosure coming up. And they will target those people. They'll put signs and they will put flyers, and sometimes they even go door to door. And they tend to focus on lower income neighborhoods. And unfortunately, they do often prey on people of color, senior citizens, sometimes even people who've had a death in the family. If an obituary shows up, and people are desperate because they can't pay their mortgage or they have other bills. So what they'll do is they'll say, hey, I can sell your house real quick and get you cash for your house. And I know you need cash. But unfortunately, maybe they'll give you $20,000 for your house, and maybe your house is worth $80,000. So it's always important if you're going to sell your home, go with a reputable, licensed New York realtor who's in your local area. Look at the tax records to see what your home is worth. It should be right on your tax bill. It should say what your home is worth. You look for the full market value of your house, and don't let them pressure. They really do. They do very high pressure on people. They will try to tell you your house is ugly and it's in terrible repair and nobody wants it. And the truth is that home is probably worth a lot more. And they're going to get a lot of money out of you by doing that.
And Cindy, can I just mention, as far as the assessed value of full market value, oftentimes it's actually worth even more than that. That's kind of like a starting point usually.
That's true. If you when you get the real estate broker, with the real estate agent, they'll tell you what they think they can get for your house, and it may be more than what the county feels that it's worth. But that'll give you kind of a ballpark. If someone's offering you $20,000 for your house and the county says it's worth $70,000,
something's wrong.
Something's wrong, and they're trying, and they are very high pressure, and they won't go away. So, if you have a person like that, you really should report it to the New York State Attorney General, even local law enforcement. If someone's harassing you and you've told them to go away and they won't go, you can call the police. So, watch out for that. The other kind of scam that we see is a little bit different. So say I'm a homeowner and I'm $5,000 behind on my taxes. I cannot come up with the $5,000. I've lost my job due to COVID. I can't barely buy food. There's no way I can come up with this. All of a sudden, in comes a person that calls me and says, hey, you know what? I can loan you the $5,000 and save your home. Okay, so you sign a bunch of papers and you don't really read through them. There's a lot of fine print and you just sign them. A lot of times what actually happens is they get you to sign the deed to your home over to them. And then you have to make payments for a certain period of time to sort of buy your home back from them. And sometimes the payments can be really high, and the person who's scamming you knows that you probably won't be able to make the payments. So ultimately, they will keep the deed to your house. So if anybody's offering to bail you out of your mortgage foreclosure or your tax foreclosure, chances are they're really trying to steal your home, in effect. So it's very important. Go to a licensed New York attorney, contact legal aid, contact, I mean, any type of transaction with your home. It's important that you get legal advice and read through all the papers and really understand what's going on. But unfortunately, I think we're going to see both of those types of scam, the home sale, and then also the home buyback scams.
Okay. What would you say about reverse mortgages if someone's old enough to qualify? I know that's sometimes been popular for people, specifically senior citizens.
Reverse mortgages can be a very useful tool for people as long as they understand exactly what they're getting into. And the problem is oftentimes they really don't. You need to be at least 62 years of age or older. And the older you are, the more equity you're going to get out of your home. A reverse mortgage, in case anyone's not familiar, is basically taking the equity you have in your home out and giving it to you in cash to use, either in a lump sum or a monthly payment. There are different options available. The biggest problem I see with it is that, as I said, sometimes people don't understand. They emphasize the fact that you retain ownership of the home. Your name is still on the deed. And in fact, your name is still on the deed. But what they don't realize is that there's now a lien, a mortgage lien on that property, basically worth the entire value of the home. So depending upon when you leave your home, whether it's through death or a nursing home or decide to sell, whatever it is, at that point, that mortgage becomes due and payable. And so if you had your home all your life and intended to leave it to your heirs and think that a reverse mortgage is going to help you in the meantime, it will help you, but you're not going to have a home to leave to your heirs. The home will be there, but if they want it, they're going to have to pay market value to get it. So that's a real important point to make sure that the senior understands. And then additionally, over the years, we've seen some problems with individuals not realizing it's very important that you maintain your property taxes and maintain the property. And we've seen several individuals that maybe had a little financial difficulty, a problem, they fell behind their taxes, even just a little bit. The mortgage company jumped in, paid those taxes. They claimed that there was a breach of contract, and they proceeded to file foreclosure on the home. And that was a whole nother battle. So I have seen reverse mortgages be useful tools for people, but they have to really fully understand and make sure they know what they're getting into.
And also another thing that we've seen is if you're away from the home for an extended period of time, that's another reason they can use to try to go to court and foreclose on you. So like, say you broke your hip and went into a nursing home, and you're in the nursing home for more than a year, sometimes, well, they will. I mean, they jump on it because they want to get that house. So that's another thing to be aware of. If you have a situation where you have to leave for an extended period of time, you might be at risk of foreclosure.
Okay. Anything I missed? Anything we want to talk about in general in terms of the helpline or just housing in general? Anything like that? One
more thing I was thinking about as I was sitting here is that right now, if you receive a eviction notice to come to court and you do not show up, the courts are not granting default judgments. So if you don't show up for your hearing, you won't be evicted, but it doesn't look good on you if you don't show up.
Yeah, and it'll come back to bite you down the road, but not right now.
Right.
The same is true with foreclosures right now. I wanted to point out, I think at the beginning of the crisis, I think there was a bit of a misunderstanding that people thought there was some sort of rent holiday or mortgage payment holiday and people weren't paying. So that's not true. It's not really a holiday because you might have a forbearance, you might have a stop in mortgage payments, you might not be evicted because the state of New York is holding off on evictions, but you're still going to owe that money. So if you can pay your rent, you should pay it. If you can pay your mortgage, you should pay it. It's not going to be a help to you to get into more legal trouble. Just keep paying your mortgage if you're able. If you're not, help is there.
And actually, even if you've already entered into some phase of foreclosure and the mortgage company is currently not accepting payments, we still advise, if you have the ability to save that mortgage payment and put it in a safe account. You do have to be cautious if there are other creditors. Other creditors can come after bank accounts and freeze them and obtain the assets. So you have to make sure that it's safe. But if you have the ability to save the monthly mortgage payment going forward, you should do that. It looks good in court. It helps you. It gives you a backup plan if things don't work out. You've got some money to move with and maybe make a deposit on another living arrangement. So it's always advisable. It's either going to go toward the mortgage or give you a cushion that maybe you never had before.
I wanted to say one thing about people's credit. I know a lot of people are worried about their credit if they missed mortgage payments during COVID. The CARES Act actually provides that your credit can't be negatively impacted if you took a forbearance or any of the other options that are available to you at this time. So hopefully, your credit, if you get one of these forbearances for a federal loan, it only applies to federal loans, but if you get one of those, your credit will not be impacted. So don't worry about taking that forbearance if you need it.
Okay.
Also, in a related note about credit, if you're able to avoid the eviction however you can, either by paying or moving out before it is executed, that will not have an effect on your credit. But if an eviction is ordered and executed, then it probably will have a strong bearing on your credit.
Yes.
Okay. All right. If there's anybody out there that has specific legal questions about their particular situation, we highly encourage you to call our helpline, and that is 1-877-777-6152. I'll say that again, 877-777-6152. You can also, if you feel so inclined, go to our website, lasmany.org. That's lasmany.org. And there is a link for our intake, our online intake system. You'll fill out some questions, and a paralegal will be back in touch with you. And this video will be up on our Facebook page as well as YouTube page and our website. We'll probably cut some of the segments up, and please like and share it. If there's somebody that you think might be in trouble with their housing situation, please do share this information with them. And we're the Legal Aid Society of Mid New York. We serve 13 counties across central New York. We have offices in Syracuse, Utica, Oswego, Binghamton, Cooperstown, and Oneonta, and Watertown. So please do call us. Please do reach out to us with any questions. We are a free civil legal service across central New York. Did I miss anything?
I would just like to say that for our foreclosure services in particular, a lot of people feel they can't reach out because they feel their income might be too high, because when you hear legal aid, you think it serves low-income people. But with our foreclosure program, we do not have any income limits. So you can reach out regardless of your income level for help. Evictions is different. Generally, we target low-income people. So.
Okay. All right, that's it. Thank you so much. I want to thank my panel, Michael Roberts, Cindy Hendrickson, Rose Roberts. Thank you so much for coming. And we will be back again with another town hall soon. So thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks, Alex.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
Bye.